There's been a disaster. So a couple weeks ago, it was time to install the crash cage and the sub cage, and you can see that only one has been installed because we ran into a big problem. I broke a bolt off in the motor mount. Previous owner had frame sliders on the bike, and to put the crash cage on, you need to remove those, and I was able to remove the one on the left side, even though it took a lot to get it to come out. It eventually came, and then I went to do the same on the right side, and it went from really tight to extremely loose very fast, and I thought I had broke the bolt loose, but in fact I just snapped the bolt in half. So we have a bolt stuck in the motor mount, and you can see the light on the other side because we drilled through the old bolt all the way, and we tried to use the drill and extract method through this center motor mount hanger and collar, but because it's pretty deep in there, the extractor doesn't have good leverage, I don't think, and I've broke probably 3 extractors at this point. Instead of just trying to keep going through here and barely getting any grip on the extractor, I'm just going to drop the whole motor, so then just a little bit, so I can get direct access to the motor mount under the frame. Instead of trying to go through here, I'll drop it enough so where I can get my hands right onto the motor mount, and then try the extractor again. And if that doesn't work, or the threads are all fucked up, I will just have to rethread or use a Time-Sert thread kit for this motor mount. I just wanted to talk about this a little bit. I'm going to try and drop the motor without taking the throttle bodies off. This hose and this hose might get in the way, so I'll have to find a way to let that clear the frame here. And then I still have some slack on the throttle cable, so hopefully it's enough, because I'm not dropping the motor entirely. I really just need it to go down an inch or two, just so it is below the part of the frame and I can actually get directly to the motor mount instead of going through the frame. But basically, at this point, I'm going to unplug the major electrical connections here, and then part of the main wiring harness in there. Pull the gear selector off, front sprocket, and then we should just be able to slowly lower this thing down and hopefully get to the bolt in the motor mount. If I can drop it and get that bolt out, I'll be very happy. Once I unplug everything, and if I find anything major that I should talk about, I will let you know. But I think it's pretty simple. I mean, you have 4 plugs here, the 5 across the throttle bodies, and then clip connectors on the main wiring harness, and then you have the positive battery wire here, which I don't know if you can see right there, that little boot down there, that's where that connects, which might be a little bit of a pain to get to there. So I might just unhook it from here instead, and hopefully this thing clears. So we finally dropped the motor. As you can see, this is what's been causing all the headache. That was the bolt through here, and that's all that's left of it because we drilled out most of it through here. But now we can get an extractor directly into here. I can go straight onto it with the torch, and if that doesn't work, we just got to drill out the whole thing and do a Time-Sert kit. As you can see, I didn't take the throttle bodies off. I didn't take the pressure regulator off. I did take this off and put it back on after the fact, just so there's no gas leaking out, because it would have gotten in the way on the frame here. And throttle cables are still connected. They're a little tight, but there's still some play to them. I did ratchet strap the rear end to give some lift. We loosened this adjuster bolt in here, which I believe is a 21mm hex, which I have to go grab one so I can actually tighten it back down. But everything else really didn't need any adjustments. I just loosened these adjusters a little bit with the straps. I can kind of move the swing arm where I'd like it. The only 2 spots we had trouble with was the motor rubbing on this center hanger on the frame here, and then as you can see, it's a little tight down there where it's rubbing. That still was kind of in the way. What I ended up doing is I think I just took the swing arm from the back and was just kind of wiggling it back and forth, and that kind of moved the motor enough. It shifted it to where it lost contact here and here, and then it kind of slid forward the rest of the way. And I just have a jack with a piece of wood under the oil pan, and right now, just to make sure it doesn't fall forward at all overnight, we just put 2 jack stands there just in case. It's bouncing pretty good on the jack, but for whatever case, just to be safe, we have those there in case it does want to come forward. If you need to drop the motor just a little bit, you can get away with not pulling off all this extra crap, like your throttle bodies and this and the thermostat. That'll differ if you actually need to pull the motor completely out of the frame, but you just do the 4 plugs here, the 5 here, there's 3 to the subframe, and then there's another 3, that big gray, a green, and a clear, and that's all the electrical and your main battery. Instead of doing it down in here, that boot right there, I just pulled it off of this guy, and that was a lot easier to get to. We're gonna hopefully get the bolt out, extract that bolt, and then I can put all this back, which is probably gonna be the hardest part, getting everything to line up correctly, and that'll definitely be a pain, but happy we dropped it, because now I can get direct access to the bolt that needs to get extracted. So I'm installing the shark fin, or the finger saver, on the bike. It's basically this little deflector that goes here so your fingers don't get caught up in your chain and sprocket. I chose to use riv nuts here to secure this, and essentially they're these like inserts that with a tool will crush down and create this flange, and it holds place in your hollow piece of metal. I chose to go with M6 riv nuts. I bought this tool off Amazon, which I'll link. It's kind of expensive, but it has a nice guide here for the stroke, or how far the riv nut's going to get crushed. And on this test piece of metal, the one on the left was crushed more than the one on the right, but because the swing arm's probably about, I don't know, 2 or 3 times the thickness of this metal piece, to compensate for the compression, I went with the setting on the right, which was about 2.5 to 3 millimeters of stroke, which you set on this tool here. I used a 23/64 drill bit to drill into the swing arm to insert the riv nuts, and like I said, I used about 2.5 to 3 millimeters of stroke on the tool, but all I did was kind of clamp down the shark fin where I wanted it, and then I marked it and center punched on the swing arm, then just did a small pilot hole, and then went straight in with the 23/64, and then basically you thread the open the handles, thread the riv nut onto the tip of the tool, insert it into the swing arm, and then clamp the handles together, and it creates that flange, and these things aren't going anywhere. And then you just take your bolts, put some Loctite on, and you should be good to go. Sizing wise, it was a 23/64 drill bit into the swing arm, which was the perfect size for those. If you don't have a tool, I'll link a couple other videos of people who installed these, and they just kind of used the riv nuts without the tool, but they just made the hole tight enough to where they just tapped them in nice and snug, so there's no flange that was created. About 3 millimeters of stroke or crush on the tool if you end up using that, and then if you're using the tool, it was a 23/64 drill bit once again. Finishing up the front wiring right now. Basically just I zip tied these loose wires together here, and then zip tied it to the crossbar so it's not kind of hanging on the motor or anything like that. And you can kind of see up in here how everything's pretty far away, not resting on the motor itself. That blue wire is the fan wire. That relay pack I also zip tied to the cross member of the frame that's there. And then on the other side, just those wires, also the cross member of the frame, just to keep everything off the motor, so there's really nothing sitting directly on the hot surface there. And double check to make sure that the clean air mod's not getting crushed or anything like that. And I'll probably reroute the speedometer wires out here and then like underneath here, and I'll probably mount it here, that way I'll be able to get a good look at it when I'm riding. And in the back, I mean, this didn't change. This stuff's just kind of sitting here. It's not getting crushed by the seat. These wires, I use double-sided Velcro on the back side of here and here, so I can pull them off the battery tray if need be. But those are underneath the seat, not crushed, and kind of secured so they're not flying around or anything like that.
Hottest stash in the carpet. Yeah, we trapping out apartments. I